Hello, everyone, and welcome into the main event here on Tuesday afternoon. My name is Johnny Zawislak. I'm joined here by Jaison, Nieves, and Pat Dallahan is producing. Ryan Mack is not going to be able to be here for the first segment. He's at an interview. But I'm happy to also welcome in the head coach of Temple Women's Basketball, Diane Richardson, for the first segment of Timeout Tuesdays with Coach Rich. Coach Dan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I promise I won't call a timeout, though.
Thank you so much for being on. I mean, this is really exciting. Just be able to sit down with you for a little bit, kind of talk a little bit more, like not one-on-one, but just a little bit more private setting than a normal press conference. Thank you again for coming on. But I think, the first question I want to start with, kind of more broad. I mean, we're a little bit more into conference play. I kind of want to what is your take been playing in the American this season with how tight it is and how every game feels like it comes down to the wire? I mean, how has it been this season?
Yeah, absolutely. When I look at the conference and then I see all the teams that have come in, and I know most of those coaches, and there are some really, really good coaches, which makes this conference so dynamic and so unique, is that you've got, coaches that really know what they're doing and players, that they recruit. And so it's been a tough battle, this season.
And the tough battle, like you mentioned, if you look at the standings, the way that it's tied, there's like 5 or 6 teams that are tied for like third place right now.
Right.
It's so close. Like when you're going, now that you're at this part in the season, does it add like a little bit more pressure when you go into every game, like knowing that like that night that you can drop from third all the way down to like 8th?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I tell my players. If we win, we move up. If we lose, we plummet down.
Yeah.
And, and like you said, there's a log jam. And, one game could make or break you.
And kind of going off of like how one game could make or break you, I mean, this season for you guys specifically, like your highs have been high, the way that you've been able to play. And then other times you guys haven't really been able to play up to that high standard. There have been inconsistencies, whether it's on offense. You've mentioned the defense has also kind of been inconsistent and not to where you'd like to see it. I mean, what do you think kind of contributes to the inconsistencies there? And how do you guys plan to, as we get farther into conference play and closer to that tournament, how do you plan to combat that?
Yeah, we have been up and down. And, we're losing games we probably should have won and vice versa. But I think it boils down, Johnny, to just that mentality, an elite mentality, and expecting to win. The team hasn't won a lot. And so, you fight, and then you're like, well, people counted us out anyway.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get their mindset turned around to, getting their confidence together so that we can battle through and push through some of those games.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of trying to get that mindset together, and kind of going off of Sunday's game specifically, the loss to Charlotte, you guys were up by 17 towards the end of that third quarter, and then ended up going into overtime, and then the whole craziness at the end of that first overtime with the clock.
Yeah.
I mean, what was your message to them after the game, and kind of getting them focused on just trying to move on and focus on that USF game?
Yeah, unfortunately, when we lose a tough one like that, their heads are down, and we've got to move on. And, it was tough to see that lead go away. And we're used to coming from behind and battling hard. Yeah. Well, we were up, and then we kind of let it slip away. We got into some foul trouble at the end. But just getting them to understand and practice today to talk about next game, and let's work on our consistency where we can work through some of those things.
Yeah. And you mentioned the foul trouble that you guys had gotten in. You guys were without Jaleesa Molina. Is there any update to kind of, it's a couple days now since then. Is there an update to kind of how she's doing and if she'll be available on Saturday? I mean, if you can't say, you can't say.
Yeah, well, you don't try to get my game plan, Johnny.
There is a question here on that. But where do we get?
I'll just say day to day.
Day to day. Okay.
I sound really important saying that, didn't I?
Yeah. All will be revealed in time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to kind of talk about Jaleesa a little bit too, because I know in the beginning of the season you talked about. I mean, she was struggling with the offensive fouls and the screens, and kind of getting adjusted to the NCAA rules coming from not the Netherlands.
Yeah. The Netherlands.
The Netherlands. Okay. Yes, the Netherlands. So How do you feel like she's developed? She's only a freshman, but how
Yeah.
do you feel like she's come along? And have you seen progress with her? I know the injuries kind of might have put a halt in that a little bit, but before she went down, I mean, what
Yeah.
did you see from her?
Yeah, she had been progressing, and the more reps she got, the more she was in tune to our style of play, how to set good screens, how to read defenses. And so we're really excited about her growth, and she's going to continue to grow. I know she will.
Yeah. There's another player that I kind of wanted to ask you about that's really performed well these last couple weeks. Demi Washington. I mean, she's a transfer coming in from Vanderbilt, and she's really just taken that role of kind of being able to get to the rack, get to the basket, and really has been a focal point of your guys' offense. I mean, what have you seen from her, and how has she kind of become this player now?
Yeah, she's always been a leader, and when she came to us, she was a leader just coming in off the court. And so she takes that responsibility on the court, and we've seen her step up. She's talking in huddles, and she's taking a leadership role and doing some things that she wasn't used to do at Vanderbilt. But we have confidence in her, and we believe in her, and she's not disappointing us.
Yeah. And I wanted to go back to Sunday's game with the foul troubles you had mentioned. I know after the press conference, you mentioned you wanted to go back and look at the film and see what the refs saw, how they interpreted things. I mean, going back and looking at the film, was there anything that you saw that your players were doing or that maybe they could do differently to make sure that you guys stay out of that foul trouble, especially if you guys are down a man with like you are with Teresa?
Yeah, well, some of the things, some of the fouls, they were reaching, not moving their feet, but reaching. And, of course, there were a lot of fouls.
Yeah.
But some of the fouls, they were reaching and definitely fouling. But, we have to still play through the referees and what their discretion is.
Yeah. And kind of going off of that with the aggressive defense that you mentioned, that's the focal point of this team for you and what you preach every press conference. If you listen to anyone, that's the main thing. The first thing you'll do is come in and ask about and talk about the defense. Do you think that kind of contributes to it feels like after every game we're talking about the foul troubles, whether it's Rain, Nieves, or someone. Do you think that might be a main contributor for why? And do you ever kind of waver on that aggressive defense or tell them to be less aggressive because of it?
Well, when we see the way the game is going, in that Charlotte game, the first half, they didn't shoot any free throws.
Yeah.
We played tough defense, and that's why we were ahead. The second half, we continued with our high-risk, high-reward defense, and we got called for fouls. And so we've got to find a way where, we obviously are listening to the refs, but we've got to find a way that we can still be aggressive without even having the inkling of looking like a foul.
And we'll move away from the Charlotte game. I want to ask you about USF. And I obviously you can't, like you mentioned earlier, you can't give away your game plan.
Right.
You can't.
Right.
But is there anything that you can kind of divulge to us that you've seen from just, and if you've watched any film on them or anything that you plan to implement for Saturday specifically?
Yeah.
You can say.
Well, USF and Jose Fernandez does a great job, and he's a master X's and O's guy. So they run a lot of sets, but we can't specifically just play our scout on each set because there are so many. So we've got to play temple defense and have our defensive concepts. One of them is to limit touches by his shooters. He has some shooters. We've got to limit their touches and not let them catch the ball. And then if they do catch the ball, they've got to be able to see bodies. They've got to see us in front of them so they hesitate to shoot.
Yeah, and I another thing I lost my train of thought there for a second. Oh no! I was gonna say if either of you have a question, jump in. I completely lost my train of thought.
So you
there.
talked about playing temple defense and playing tough. Getting after the boards. What does that entail? What? How would you describe that in 2 sentences?
Yeah, quick feet and active hands, and so our hands are active, taking away passing lanes. Just being a bother, taking away space so that they can't see to throw the pass.
Yeah. And obviously the team, a lot of energy. You see it with Aaliyah, and you see it on the bench every time they hit a three. What role in your program, how heavily do you value having an energetic team?
That's our mantra. We have to be. It's got to be energy, enthusiasm, and focus. Yeah. And energy is number one.
Yeah. Jason, if you have anything, you can jump in.
Oh, no, I was just going to kind of follow up on that. I know a big emphasis for you after every game, you come in and the first thing usually you speak on is energy and defense. Yeah. And how have you continued to work with the team to ensure that their energy is remaining high throughout the game? Because, sometimes we've seen it throughout the season. You come out a little slow and then you call a timeout really quickly and kind of get the team on the right track. So how do you continue to kind of balance that out and keep their mindsets in the right way?
Yeah, just explaining to them, they know that our defense is better when we have energy. And, showing them on film when we're energetic, when our energy is there, we're playing defense, we're moving our feet, we're talking on defense and talking to each other. And those things are important. And they know that when the energy is high, the defense will be even better.
Yeah. And I kind of wanted to, we only have about 4 or 5 minutes left in the segment, so we'll ask a couple more questions. Then we have a question of the week that we do for our show every week, and I wanted to make sure that we ask you and get your input on it as well. But the first thing I wanted to ask you, we're coming towards the end of conference play. You've seen the team develop and how they've played, so you know where they need to improve. If you had to choose one topic, whether it's the offense, defense, energy, whatever it is, where do you think that you want to see you guys improve the most as you round out conference play?
Communication. So they have to be able to talk to each other, especially on defense, so we know what's coming, if a screen is coming or I've got your man, those kinds of things.
And I kind of wanted to go off of that, with how the season was last year where you had very little depth, and now you have so many players that are all in the lineup there this year. You have Rain coming in, Jaleesa, with all of that, do you think that's a major contributor to why maybe the communication isn't exactly where you might want it to be? Or is there something else to this, just maybe the communication is a little lacking?
No, I think they just get so involved with the game and looking and thinking what's the next move that they forget to talk. And so we've kind of tried to get them to talk more. I've even mic'd them up in practice to see who's talking, and it's on a loudspeaker. But some of them are naturally shy, but then some of them get kind of into the game and thinking too much that they don't talk. But we want to get them in that habit.
Yeah, that's such an interesting tactic to mic them up during practice. Has you seen that? Does that help at all with them talking more?
Yeah, they do. We have a couple mics going on at the same time, and you can hear them when they're talking. And if they're not talking, we're like, I can't hear you. So it kind of puts them on notice when we mic them up because they know I better talk. So I'm trying to get them in the habit without having to mic them up every day. Some of them like it, like Aaliyah's like, hey, am I being mic'd up today? No, you talk enough. Let me get somebody else.
That's so funny because just the way that she carries herself. And that doesn't surprise me at all that she just wants to be mic'd up at all times and loves to be how important is it for someone like her? How important has she been trying to get everyone else communicating, and does that does her aura kind of affect the players around her to want to communicate like she does?
Yeah. And I always say the speed of the group is the speed of the leader. And so she carries that on her shoulders, and I let her know when she's letting us down. So, she's aware that she's kind of the head of the snake when it comes to energy and enthusiasm. And she'll step up, and then sometimes she gets down. I'll give her the stare, and then she gets back up.
We have about 2 minutes left, and I want to make sure I ask you this before you go. For our question of the week this week that we're going to do in our last segment where we'll give our answers, but we want to ask you before you go. You could choose anyone in Temple history, whether it's athletics or just anyone you've known throughout the time, to have lunch with. Just sit down and talk with and have a good lunch with. Who would you choose and why?
I would say John Chaney. Yeah. Obviously he was a great motivator in the sport. He could motivate his players, and he was a smart coach. And so I'd love to pick his brain and find out, what is it that you do and how do you get your team to play above and beyond what is expected.
Yeah. And if you could go anywhere on Temple's campus to get lunch with John Chaney, where would you go?
Wingstop. No. I take that back. Maxie's with his Old Bay wings.
See, I know Pat here. He's a big fan of Eddie's.
I'm an Eddie's
guy.
guy.
Eddie's guy.
Yeah,
Eddie's pizza. But that's a good choice, though. Maxie's.
You can't go wrong.
Yeah, you can't go wrong. I love Maxie's Old Bay wings, and I'm an Old Bay connoisseur. And he's got it down pat over there.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. That'll do it for this segment here. We're right up against the break. But thank you so much for doing that. This was awesome, and I really appreciate you hopping on and being able to do this.